My name is Kagan Luce. I'm really excited to be here today for Crowdfunding Your Story. We've got some incredible artists and creators with us today. Dorothy's Jean, Spike Trotman, Will Lavoie, and Greg Burnham. And they're going to talk to us about their work. But we had a last minute schedule change, so I hopped on here to moderate this panel. So I'm going to let these folks introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Dorfis.
Hello, how you guys doing? My name is Dorfis. I'm Haitian American. I'm a comic creator, writer. I came out with Spiritual Destiny in 2015. That is my first comic, my baby, and I've currently working on other titles. I came out with Mia Kaler, my first lesbian superhero, and that's about it right now.
Awesome. Spike, can you go next?
Hello, I'm C. Spike Trotman. Just Spike is fine. I am the owner, founder, and editor for life of Iron Circus Comics. It is the largest comics publisher in Chicago, probably the Midwest. I don't know for sure. It's hard to quantify these things, but it sounds right and it feels right. So I'm going to keep saying it until proven otherwise. We put out between 10 and 15 books in a year, and our mission statement is a focus on the strange and amazing. Probably part of the reason I am on this panel is I was a Kickstarter early adopter. This was the very first book I Kickstarted, and it was run the year the site launched, which was 2009. Since then, we have run 28 crowdfunding projects for comics. We have funded 28 crowdfunding projects for comics, and we have collected in excess of $2 million towards the production of comics.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, Newton?
Hey, hello, everybody. My name is Newton Lillavois. Just like Dorfis, I am a Haitian American comic book creator. I'm mostly known for Crescent City Monsters, the 2020 Cliff Comic Award winning comic series. Just last, I think, September, we completed our fourth Kickstarter, which raised around $31,000. So that was great, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Greg?
So first, after Spike's introduction, I'm trying to figure out why I'm even here. You know what I mean? I think she could do a whole, class on it on her own. Greg Burnham. I am a writer and an author, co-creator of Tuskegee Airs. I also have a comic called The Search for Sadaka. I'm working on some really cool stuff that's going to be coming out this year as well. Some, working with some other people. And I also write children's books.
Awesome, yes. So you definitely check out all of these folks' work on their websites, which you can find at comicsincolor.org. So I got a couple questions for you today. First, what made you use crowdfunding to fund your projects? And I'm going to start with Spike on that one.
A total lack of any other sort of option. Kickstarter was one of those things that came along. It's sort of like a perfect time for me. It's a lot like, the planets aligned. Everything just happened at the exact amazing time for me to sort of kick off this adventure that I've had on Kickstarter, growing my business into what it is today, primarily through the use of Kickstarter. It's hard to sort of parse now, but 2009 was actually a completely different environment in comics than it is today. That was still sort of this period where comics were not quite mainstream yet, in my opinion. They were well on their way, but still the only real major player was Scholastic. And they were printing Jeff Smith's Bone. They were reprinting it in color. And that was just starting to gain steam. Not everyone had totally caught on yet. And because of that, the people who were making comics were still what we kind of think of as like the old guard comics publishers, people like Dark Horse Image, DC, Marvel, Oni, a few others. And they had to, when they were making editorial decisions, they had to focus on what they thought they could move, not in Barnes and Noble, not on Amazon.com, but in comic shops. And the kind of things that I wanted to write and draw, editors who I still to this day consider friends would just be all like, this is good, but I can't see this moving in, the android's dungeon, which was a totally fair assessment. They are a for-profit business trying to keep their heads above water just like everybody else. So I didn't hold that against them. But I would talk to my friends about this book I wanted to make because, believe it or not, I had a lot of experience having no money when I was a cartoonist, and I developed this whole sort of slew of tips and tricks to survive this capitalist hellscape that we are all forced to survive in. And I was like, man, I wish I could afford to pay an artist to draw this script. I wish I could afford it. I wish I could afford it. And then a friend of mine's like, have you heard of Kickstarter? And I'm like, no. And this was live on stage at a panel, and he was explaining Kickstarter to me. And I just went, cool. And I went home, and this was back when you had to be invited to join Kickstarter. You had to literally know somebody to get an invite to Kickstarter. And I got it, and I funded this book. And I think I asked for $6,000 because I wasn't paying myself. I was just paying the artist. And that was just to do the interiors. And I got it, ended up with like $13,000. And to show you how much the landscape has changed, there are people fucking dragging me over the coals for making $13,000 on Kickstarter, because that's way too much money to make on Kickstarter.
That's awesome. I love how crowdfunding has kind of like let go of the gatekeepers and allowed people to kind of tell their own stories. Newton, why did you decide to use crowdfunding?
So this is going to be this is a great question, because it kind of circles back to like the origin story. So this here is my first the first comic book I bought through Kickstarter, right? And this is through Spike's Iron Circus publishing company. So before I even bought that, I used to be a big Kickstarter backer, right? But I used to back mostly tech stuff because I was really into gadgets and stuff. So I used to back all these nerdy like computer and robotics. So I used to do that a lot. And then I noticed they had a comic book section. So I was like, word, all right, let me check this out. So I started scrolling through it, and that's when I saw Shadow Eyes, and I backed it. I got the book, and I was like, yo, this is dope. It kind of blew my mind, because I was like, okay, so we gave this person money so they could produce this book, and this person, I was like, yo, that's kind of mind blowing. I was like, this is kind of cool. So I was doing more research, and that's when I encountered that Spike had created this PDF, and the PDF gave you like a breakdown of how to do a Kickstarter, and it was so good. It had like things you should consider, like shipping costs, marketing. I mean, it broke it down really nice. And I think it was 2 PDFs, in fact. One was like a general PDF, and then another one got into specifics. But because of that, I was like, this is the route that I'm going to take. So thank you, Spike. So I was like, I was really inspired by that, and basically that's why I went to the crowdfunding. Right, I actually I was a big Kickstarter person in the first place. I actually was a backer. I've seen the whole process. I was behind the scene. I was a consumer of it. So, and I appreciated the whole the ecosystem and the way it worked and the opportunities it provided for creators. I was just blown away by the whole concept. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to go into this as a creator. So that's why I decided to get into Kickstarter.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that Kickstarter did like tech other things. I've only really seen comics and movies myself.
Oh no, they've got a slew of other stuff. I mean, you could Kickstart anything. Anything.
That's awesome. Very cool. Dorfis, why did you decide to crowdfund?
Well, when I first started writing my comic book, I was paying out of pocket, and I finally got my comic book finished, and it was really time for me to print, and I had no expenses for it. And then my friend was always, before I even started the comic, he was like, why don't you start a Kickstarter? And I had no idea about it. I had to research. I started seeing a lot of creators dropping Kickstarter links. So I started backing them first, and I started scrutinize how they run their Kickstarters. So then I decided to run my first Kickstarter. I just dropped it, and I didn't even promote it. That's when I learned a big lesson about Kickstarters. And then I dropped it again, and Roy preached him in my head, and he started actually educating me the process of Kickstarters, and he made me actually research and learn about it, and fit me as a creator. So that's one of the reasons why I did get involved with Kickstarter.
Nice. And Greg?
All right, so I gotta be the old dude here. I gotta take you back to. Oh man, this thing is gonna mess up.
Put it
It's
in
not
front
gonna
of
cut.
you. Yeah. Mm.
Yep. Okay. Anyways, I got this cool comic book that Marcus and I created in like 2000. It's called The Starving Artist. And we were like, we're just gonna do it ourselves. We had no idea, what it was gonna take.
All right, we are back. Sorry, we had a little bit of a technical hiccup there, but we are back. And we were just talking about how do you market your product to potential investors? And Newt gave this amazing answer. I hope that you all were able to hear it. I don't want to have to ask him to repeat the whole thing.
I can repeat it if you want to. But...
Well, could you maybe summarize it in a shorter, quick thing about the warm,
the
cool
warm fuzzy
customers?
audience,
Yeah.
and then the cool audience. Yeah. So yeah. So once I decided that I was going to use Kickstarter as a platform to help fund the production of my comic book, the next step was to actually decide what business model to use, right? And I decided to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to use. I think they call it. Is it called freemium now? I'm not sure, but anyway, you provide your content for free, right? With the idea that you'll build an audience along the way, and it seems counterintuitive because why you think like, okay, why would somebody buy something if they could have it for free? But as a comic book creator, you actually and myself as a comic book creator, I know when I really like something, I'll actually buy the physical thing. So that's the model I decided to use, and I built an audience by for issue number one by showing the pages every like week or so, maybe 3 or 4 pages, and building the audience that way. So by the time I hit my first Kickstarter, that I had an audience already waiting for the book. And one of the other advanced things I use is the Facebook pixels, which involves kind of two audiences. The first 2 to 3 days of your Kickstarter campaign, you want to make sure that you target your warm audience. Those are the people who actually know you and who are more likely to actually buy from you or support your Kickstarter, because you want to be able to easily convince people and get that momentum within the first 2 to 3 days. So your warm audience is the best target for that. And then after that, you target, your cold audience, people who never heard of you, so but may be interested in your project. So that's just one of the techniques I use for marketing my Kickstarter. Was that quick enough?
Yes, that was wonderful. You summed it up very well. I'm going to pass it to Spike next.
Wow. Okay. I have so much to say about marketing. I have so much to say about promoting your work. The thing I always like to lead with is you are your own PR department. I think a lot of artists have a tendency to downplay their own accomplishments and abilities and not want to walk around like the Energizer Bunny with the big drum and be all like, buy my book, back my Kickstarter, I'm great, look at my work, isn't it amazing? But the thing is, you're going to have to do that if you want to make your Kickstarter as successful as possible. Iron Circus has kind of we've moved on to what I call like the well-oiled machine phase of Kickstarter, because after like 28, you kind of develop a system. And every time we have a Kickstarter, people who back it, like, this sounds very malevolent, but it's not. They go on a list. And that list is our mailing list, sort of like the master Kickstarter mailing list. These are the people who know who we are, know that we deliver, the warm audience Newton was talking about. And every time we launch a Kickstarter now, after collecting 28 Kickstarters worth of backers, between 30 and 40,000 people get an email about it. And what happens is, even if they don't back it, a lot of people will click through just to see. And we make sure we have a video ready for them. We make sure we have a breakdown ready for them. We make sure that they know what they're going to get, some samples of interiors. And we make sure we always have a early bird tier. And part of the reason we have an early bird tier, which is just the book and a PDF with free shipping in the United States and half price shipping overseas. And we usually have 100, maybe 200 of those, because Kickstarter has it has a popularity measure. And if I can get 40,000 people just sort of investigating the Kickstarter within the hour of its launch, and then maybe 200 people backing it as quickly as possible with no time to spare, that shoots Iron Circus's projects to most popular project on Kickstarter more often than it doesn't. And when people look at the most popular project on Kickstarter and they see it's like a comic project, not even a tech project or a movie project or something, we get a lot of clicks that way. And that's its own form of self-promotion, because on average, we get maybe 30% of our backers, and this is in the Kickstarter dashboard, you can check for yourself. 30% of our backers are people who were just browsing Kickstarter and just found us because we were in new projects, popular projects, top projects for our category, etc., because of that initial surge. And after those first 3 days, like Greg was talking about, after those are over with, the initial rush to back is over with, then we kind of settle into, at this point, we run a lot of 2-week projects. We occasionally run a month-long project. If you're new to Kickstarter, run a month-long project. Do not be like me. Like I said, I'm in the well-oiled machine phase. I am operating on a completely different level from people who are running their first Kickstarter. But make sure that you are doing everything you can to remind people the Kickstarter is happening for after the first 3 days and before the last 3 days. Tweet about it daily. If you have a Facebook page, remind the people on the Facebook page daily. Make up excuses to talk about it. Like, can we get to 100 backers today? Oh my gosh, we are $15 away from $1,000. Oh my God, we have 666 backers. Nobody back. I'll be really mad if you do. Grr. You know, just make up excuses to make people to go over there and look at it and talk about it. And that will encourage people to back it. That'll encourage, like, especially if you're really excited about it, if you're friendly about it, if you're very thankful and gracious about people's support of your work, that goes a really long way. And someone was talking about Facebook pixels. I super hate to admit this, but they work. They really, really work. If you target your advertising well, if you make sure the keywords are on point, if you make sure that you are putting the ad in front of people who are going to care about what you're selling, it works. And I hate that because I hate Facebook. But at the same time, you put like $1,000 into Facebook ad and you get $12,000 back. Like, why wouldn't you? And that's kind of where I am on that. If it's your first Kickstarter and you're looking at maybe earning $5,000 and you're looking at maybe 500-600 backers, and a lot of them are off your Facebook friends group or your Twitter or your Instagram, paid advertising is something you don't really need to explore right away. It's not going to be make or break in all likelihood. You can if you want, but my advice for like marketing early on is just don't be ashamed to go after that grandma money. Like, you know, oh, sweetie, here's $100. I'm so proud of you. Like, that's fine. A lot of people, if Amazon got started with, you know, mom and dad's money, your comic can get started with mom and dad's money. There's no shame. And, you know, make sure that all your friends know about it, and for the love of God, keep your goal as reasonable as possible. My big recommendation is you wouldn't do it for $1 less. That's your goal. If your comic cannot happen for $2,999, but it can happen for $3,000, don't ask for $5,000, especially on your first project.
Wow, that's a really great information. Thank you so much. Dorfis.
When I first started, Roy is the one that actually mentored me. He always tell me to share my the art or in the premise of my comic in these comic book groups. So, and I used to drop pictures and stuff, speak about it, because people will be often curious. But I did utilize Facebook Pixel. It really do help. It's this was my biggest funded comic book, because I did go on a hiatus, but it actually reached out to people. People will actually most of the people that actually saw my comic book ad, my Kickstarter will be because of the ad, because now Facebook's integrated with Instagram. So people that's not on Facebook now, you know, supporting through Instagram. So that really helps. I'm always dropping like images, you know, to intrigue people interest for my comic book. Twitter is very important. This is where you can engage with people, because some people don't utilize Facebook or Instagram. So I usually drop a picture. Taglines are very important. That's how people are able to find you. And you have to engage in all marketplaces, you know, to actually get your audience. And I've been on the favorites where Kickstarter have put that they love my project we love twice so far, and that is true. Like they actually watches your campaign within 24 to 48 hours to see how many people actually you know, look at it. You know, most of the time some people actually they're watching your campaign, so they'll just, you know, click on it just to see how it's progressing. So like within, your goal is to make sure you get funded 50% of your project, especially if you're starting off. Like these three right here, they're the top guys, but me, I have to make sure I'm at a 50%. My second project was actually funded within 3 days. So, but it does go by the percentage of money that you are trying to make. Okay, don't oversell yourself, but make sure you when you do a Kickstarter, it's for a certain amount that covers shipping and also for the book. So I'm still learning, but yeah, everything they said, I totally agree with it.
Shipping is so important. Oh my God. I've seen Kickstarters sunk because they did not factor in shipping. It's real and it's crazy.
I made a mistake. I made that mistake. They taught me about media mail. I'm like, what's media mail? So I started getting into them, like, oh, okay. I had no idea, but yeah, it's very.
Well, it sounds like from all of you that like a consistent, you know, posting the consistent and developing your audience before you do the Kickstarter is really important. And after you do the Kickstarter, and a consistent level of marketing that you keep up all the time to develop your audience. It sounds like that's kind of the glue that binds it all together. And this is great information. I have not tried a Kickstarter myself to print my books, but now I feel like I know a lot more about how to do it and market it. So
I wanted to say one more thing, and it sounds really simple, but when people comment on your posts, interact, like you have no idea how far that goes, because so many people, you know, you're just looking at like, I did what I had to do, I posted, now I'm gone, but it really goes a long way as far as interacting, you know, answering questions when people, you know, have them. It really helps to build your community.
Yeah, and I like also what Spike said about like kind of using your personality, right? Like get out there in different ways to engage people, which I think is great.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you all, like, what's some of the most successful crowdfunding campaigns we have? I know you mentioned your first one that you got way overfunded, Spike, but what's some of the best ones you've done? Like, the fastest or got the most money?
Kind of the thing, like every once in a while amongst friends, I joke that Iron Circus Comics is the house that porn built, because one of the sort of reliable money makers for Iron Circus has been a series called Smut Peddler, which is an anthology of erotic comics that are sex positive and consent driven, which is depressingly difficult to find. And it really started out with me sort of like sitting at my computer and making a list of my cartoonist friends who I wish would draw porn, but I had never seen them draw any. And I sent out this email, and it was bizarre because it's like they were waiting their whole lives for that email. I was like, hey guys, I want to put this thing together. It's called Smut Peddlers. Yes! You know, it's like just right away, everyone just like, yes, let me do it. And we came up with this model that has been widely sort of adopted as the standard Kickstarter anthology model. And that is, the more money the project makes, the more money the creators make as a page rate. Because if we make, you know, an extra $5,000, everyone gets a $5 page rate increase. And what that does, as well as paying the artists more equitably with regards to the final goal, it also turns every creator that's involved in the anthology into basically a street team. And they are out there telling their personal fan bases, which vary widely in size, but we've had some enormous fan bases, you know, come to the Kickstarters because of the artists we include, telling them, the more, if you buy this now, if you don't wait for this to show up in the store, if you buy this right now, you are paying me, the artist you personally like a lot, better. So please buy this now. And it works like a charm. We've made a whole lot of Smut Peddler anthologies, but the biggest one is when Iron Circus recently branched into animation. We are producing our first animated short called Lackadaisy, which is about cute little cats that drink alcohol and shoot each other. It's based on a very long running webcomic by Tracy Butler called Lackadaisy, sensibly enough. And it came home with a $330,000. I think it's still the most funded, the highest funded in the short film category of all time. I have to check because this stuff changes so fast. I don't even know anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's our biggest one, 330,000. But just for the record, everyone, like, this is not something you should be shooting for your first project. I honestly would not have wanted a $330,000 project for my first project, because the learning curve for Kickstarter, you want to start off with something small so you have plenty of room to screw up. And there's nothing wrong with screwing up. Everybody does it from time to time. It's just that I'm glad I'm in a place where I could handle like 6,000 backers and $330,000 and a whole team of animators. And I'm working with amazingly talented, amazingly creative people. And every once in a while, I'll see a project with a similar scope being run by like 18-year-olds in their first project ever. And I'm just like, no. But yeah, that's the best. That's the biggest one. Like the Smut Peddler ones are perennially six-figure projects, but Lackadaisy in the short film category has been our biggest one for 330K.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Are you going to do more animation? Is just
God, yes. God, yes. This is very beside the point, but animation is in a very interesting, strange place right now. Partly due to, if anyone wants to look it up, it's still on YouTube, I'm pretty sure. There was a short that was entirely sort of creator driven and made by a team of not necessarily volunteers, but people working on their own time, called Has Been Hotel. And it's on YouTube, and the pilot rather is on YouTube, and it got picked up by A24 for a full series. And so now kind of everyone in animation, it's like that scene where Donald Glover is walking in with the pizza in Community, I think it was, and like everything's on fire and people are running around. That's animation right now, because everyone is kind of trying to get noticed by production companies by making their own sort of pilots. And we are in there. We are trying, and who knows if it'll work, but it's happening in animation. Animation's a very exciting place to be online right now.
That's awesome. So Newton, I know that's a tough act to follow, but what was your most successful campaign that you're proud of?
Well, the most successful was the previous one, which ended this past September, I think. I launched it in August. It was it raised around $31,000 with almost 900 backers,
That's
which was a
impressive.
big jump. Yeah. And the funny thing about that one was I really didn't plan on doing a Kickstarter for the rest of the year. Like previously, I think in February or January, I had done my third Kickstarter, and that was successful. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm just gonna focus on creating the book. These Kickstarters are a lot of work. But then when the pandemic happened, people were like, oh wow, people aren't gonna back any more Kickstarters because what's going on, and people don't have any money, da da da. But then the opposite happened, right? So March hit around, April, May, and all of a sudden you saw these comic book uh, Kickstarter campaigns raising a lot of money. And I've been following Kickstarter campaigns for a while, and so I'm familiar with some of the creators, and I was like, wow, okay, this creator typically raise around maybe like 4 or 5,000, but they're raising 15,000, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. You start seeing a lot of that, and so I was like, you know what, I need to do another Kickstarter this year. I was like, there's this big wave coming, and I need to ride this wave. So I was like, I decided to launch the campaign, and it just blew my expectations. So I think that kind of spoiled me, because those were the largest numbers I've ever gotten. I'm not sure what's going to happen to my next Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is funny that way. It's not like you can't past success isn't guaranteed for future campaigns. You still got to grind. You still got to going hardcore. You got to always put in the work. Just because I raised, 31,000 in the last campaign does not mean that I'll raise anywhere near the same thing in the next one. But you just always have to put in the work. Um, so that's what I have to say about that.
That's awesome. I know that, and I love that point about like how the pandemic kind of changed things. Because I know that I was, I would go to the comic book store and drop a bunch of money. I would go to cons and drop a bunch of money on comics, but neither of those things were happening early in the pandemic. So I backed a couple of Kickstarters and got some comics in the mail, and it was awesome. So I can see why that happened.
Yeah,
Uh,
just real quick, I wanted to say, the pandemic has been bizarrely amazing for the graphic novel market in general. It has literally grown 40% in 2020. Like no mature market grows 40%, and the graphic novel market was not mature at all. If anything, it's catching up to where it should be. But 40% is like brain melting, not real numbers. And that's why suddenly Random House is making graphic novels, and Simon and Schuster and all these other people are sort of getting into, like, movie production companies are suddenly making graphic novels. And that's why, because it's like everybody in the pool now. Like the pandemic was awful for all kinds of other businesses, but for graphic novels and publishing in general, but graphic novels specifically, it was just crazy.
Awesome. Yes. Greg, what was your most successful crowdfunding campaign?
So it would be Tuskegee Airs. We were trying to get $10,000. We raised 10,000 in like 8 hours. It was totally by accident. We were like, "What the hell is happening?" I'm sorry if I'm not allowed to say that word. But we ended up raising 74,000 altogether, which was cool. It's a lot, like Spike said. Especially that being, like my first Kickstarter, like all the stuff that came with it, which I, kind of built for, customer service and all of that. But it's a lot. That month was crazy. People are like, "I want to get like you." And I'm like, you don't understand how crazy that is, because we went from, like getting like local interviews to like national interviews. Like we were in the USA Today, and we didn't even know. I didn't know about that for like 2 years. And I was Googling one day because I was looking for an article, and USA Today pops up. And so one of my friends, I'm like, "Dude, we were in USA Today." She's like, "Yeah, I saw that." And I was like, "You didn't tell me?" Like, so it went, it really, it's a lot. But yeah, that was the biggest one. I'm happy with the last one I did, which was for the latest issue of the Search for Sadaka, because I purposely kind of came in under the radar with that book. I'm not really trying to pull like the Tuskegee Airs fans per se, because I want to, I feel like I want to get like real, actual, reaction from people. Like, are they really interested in the book, or are they just supporting it because it's me or because I did Tuskegee Air? So I've that one funded in like 3 hours. I didn't understand. I think I was trying to get like 6,000, and I went to lunch or something, and people started hitting me up. And Kickstarter is different, Spike. I know you remember when every time you got a pledge, you got an email or whatever. It's different now. They don't give you the play-by-play. So I looked up and I'm like, "Yo, I already got to 6,000. I need to get to work," So, but I'm really happy with that one because I'm getting good results. And I like flying under the radar with it because I really want to see if it's a story that resonates with people and one that people are going to continue to follow.
Yeah, I just distinctly remember watching one of the Smut Peddler Kickstarters. For the first time, I saw a Kickstarter tick over into $100,000, and a voice, clear as day, in my head just said, "You're going to die." I was like, I can't hit like $100,000. That's officially too much. I'm going to die. I'm going to actually die.
I think that's a really good point to be like, to ready for the success, right? Not that every single campaign is going to be successful, but you got to be ready when it is to do all the things that you need to do. I think that's amazing. And Wow, some really successful campaigns. Dorfis, what was your most successful one?
My most successful one was the last one, but the second one was my most memorable one because I was actually signed with a publisher, and I was promoting the hell out of that one. But the last one was my most successful one. Um, I was pretty shocked. I utilized all marketing strategies, Facebook ads, Twitter, engaging with people. I engage with people a lot. I don't speak about comics all the time because you're gonna sound like a robot. People want to know what's your persona outside of comics. So I do that. I utilize all three social media platforms. Um, and I was actually I started using Mailchimp. I started mailing emailing backers or potential backers. I was actually started doing giveaways, digital prints, to gain more of a fan base. And after I did that with this Kickstarter, I really, I built my backer list, and people that did not even back my Kickstarter because they missed out on it. They actually started emailing me, and they was actually sending me funds just to support the Kickstarter because they want to be part of that package, and they want to be part of my mailing list. So this Kickstarter, I learned a lot from it, and I'm still learning a lot from everybody else. But I was very pleased because I did that on my own, and I have 200 backers I got to mail out their comics to. So, all right.
Ready for that success, right? That's great.
And I am one of them. Give me my stuff.
Yes,
Both of y'all. You know who you is.
I've been watching Greg. all of them. So I've just been learning. They give me great advice, especially in comics. Comic-Con, if I saw Greg the first time in Chicago, everybody's just being themselves at the Comic-Con. That was the biggest Comic-Con I've ever been in was Chicago. And I was with Greg Elise. He was so annoying. He would not let me rest. But I had a very time. I promoted my Kickstarter there too.
That's amazing. So you all have obviously run some very successful crowdfunding campaigns through Kickstarter. So are there any other platforms? This is a two-part question. Are there any other platforms you use for crowdfunding? And second question, are there any pitfalls that you would, for someone who's like starting out wants to do a Kickstarter, what are some things that they should avoid? Yeah, I'll start with you, Spike, since you are going.
Okay, this is kind of like secret sauce stuff, and this is applicable to maybe like 3% of people who are listening, but I have to talk about it because it's been an amazing experience. There is a third-party site called BackerKit. And what BackerKit does is, okay, you run the Kickstarter, it funds, great, awesome, good. When the 2 weeks pass, because in case you've never run a Kickstarter, there are 2 weeks between the Kickstarter ending and you actually getting the money dropped into your account. After that 2 weeks, when the backers are in a sense locked in, what I do is I set up something called a backer kit. And I actually do not use the Kickstarter surveys. When it's time to fulfill, I send everybody a link to the backer kit. And what it essentially does is you click through, it goes, hey, did you back this book? Great, here it is. Hey, by the way, while you're here, would you like some other stuff? Because Iron Circus at this point has dozens of books. And a lot of people just, while I'm here, okay, sure, I'll get this, and this too. And because we have this catalog on offer on BackerKit, they charge something like 3% of your total Kickstarter take. And I'm not going to share specific numbers, but it's one of those deals where when you have a big enough catalog and when you send people to BackerKit and you're starting to send people to BackerKit like 3,000-4,000 at a time, it's very worth it. The return is insane. And that's all sales on sort of backlist stuff that's already in the warehouse, stuff that's fast to fulfill. And it's sales that make a huge difference. The same way that, advertising on Facebook makes a huge difference. Having a Twitter following makes a huge difference. And if there's a pitfall that I would have to talk about, it's this idea that you have to develop this community. Rather, you go to Kickstarter to find your fan base as opposed to you direct your fan base to Kickstarter. And this idea that, oh, I have to get these people to Kickstarter is sort of like this temporary phase that you're in. Like, you need to be engaging with your audience and urging people to join your mailing list and uploading fun previews and art and news to your various social media accounts all year round. Even years you don't plan on running a Kickstarter, say, here's what I'm working on. Here are some sketches. Hey, everybody, I'm broadcasting live on Twitch Creative, and I'm just going to be inking some pages. Drop by and say hello. Hey, here's a poll. Which cons would you like to see me at? And then a list on Twitter of polls. And all of that's engagement. All of that is being available and being conversational with people who want to support you, because we live in a period where people expect to be able to engage with creators they like and creators they want to support. You know, you can't be sort of this nameless faceless thing off in the corner. You have to be a human being. I'm not saying, share your life like you're on the Vlog Squad or something. Just be available. And when someone asks a question, hey, I'm really into that comic you put out last year, is there going to be a sequel? Reply to them, be like, oh, we hope so, and it'll fund on Kickstarter. You should join my mailing list so you'll know when that Kickstarter launches, and you can be one of the first to back, because I have an early bird tier with free shipping. You have to be year-round cultivating potential backers, because one of the things I've said is, yeah, 30 or 40,000 people get an email every time I launch a Kickstarter, but you might have also heard me said, like, my backers vary between 2,000 and 6,000. So clearly most of those people aren't backing. But the thing is, everyone knows about it. And the thing they don't talk about with marketing is the return you are aiming for on sort of the investment you're putting into cultivating a fan base. And I've heard it said that 3% is great. If 3% of the people, you can sort of like assume 3% of the people who follow you on Twitter and follow you on Facebook and follow you on Instagram, 3% of those people will ever actually pay for anything you do. So quite frankly, you want to get that pool of people as high as possible. And right now, I'm very proud to report that my average sits at around 7% of the people who follow Iron Circus on various social media sites back us. And I attribute that to a lot of our sort of back and forth with them on social media and maintaining a mailing list and making sure everyone feels like they are sort of part of our weird out there eccentric mission to make weird out there eccentric comics.
I think that's a really good point. And I think that, at cons, it's similar to how you do it online. You're not only selling your product, but you're also selling yourself, like your personality and stuff. And you have to, infuse that into your marketing campaigns. I think that's a really good point. Okay, Greg, we'll go to you next. Do you have any other crowdfunding platforms you've used, and what are some pitfalls that you should avoid?
I haven't really delved into the other platforms. I'm kind of happy with Kickstarter for the most part. I have thought about doing some different things because I have a line of children's books that I'm trying to create, and trying to do something that's a little less cumbersome than Kickstarter. So, I've been looking into some of the other ones. As far as pitfalls, a couple of things, and I know we talked about the shipping. I think people also need to factor in supplies. Like, shipping supplies also cost money. And you should be putting that in. I think we've all probably seen or heard people who ended up with nothing after, and sometimes I've met people that have paid out of pocket to fulfill their Kickstarters. And so it's just keeping an eye on everything. The other thing, so with Tuskegee Airs, we had like a lot of dropped pledges. We had a lot of backers, so you're always going to get some dropped pledges. And so we kind of just let it, just let it ride, because we didn't all the way understand what we were doing. But then we would see people at comic conventions, and they would be like, hey, I pledged, and I never got my book. And then I'm pulling them up, like I'll pull you up right there at the table. And it's like, your pledge dropped, And I started to realize that a lot of people, especially non-Kickstarter, like people that aren't professionals or they're not really knowledgeable about it, they might have seen your post somewhere and be like, oh, I'm going to back Greg. And then they go in and they don't read. Most people don't read. So they don't know that Kickstarter is not going to take the money till the end of the month. So they'll be looking at it like, oh, you just took the money just now. And so with this the last Sadaka campaign, at the end, I had dropped pledges, and I was like, I'm gonna go collector mode, like soft collection stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like, hey, give me that money, but it's like, hey, I noticed that your pledge dropped, yada yada yada. I wrote it up really nice. I was in finance in corporate America for a long time, so I wrote it up, real nice, where I'm not badgering you or anything. And you'll have no idea how many of those people were like, oh man, I thought they already took it. Or one of the most common ones is that their card information changed. It expired, they lost it, whatever. So people were like, yo, my bad. And they were going right in and dropping the money. I ended up recouping like 80% of what was dropped. The thing about it, Kickstarter doesn't tell you, it doesn't post and say how much money was dropped, So with Tuskegee Airs, it says 74,000, no matter how much of that money actually didn't go through, but then you're still like forced to fulfill. Like if you got stretch goals, if you said, if I reach this amount, publicly, it looks like you got that amount. So go, try to get the money. And you don't have to be, like I said, if they, you don't have to be rough or gangster with it, but just be like, hey, excuse me, I noticed that, your pledge dropped, and so many times it was just an oversight, Gotcha. So I always tell people, look into doing that, because we never talk about our drop pledges, do we? We say, yeah, no, it says we raised blah, 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 but we know deep down that, how much of that didn't come through. So I always say, go, try to go after it in a nice way, though.
And I always try and tell people that whatever number you see as a final on the Kickstarter page, just subtract 10% from that just going in, because 5% is Kickstarter's cut. That's what they get for you using their platform. And the other 5%, it's usually between 3 and 4 credit card stuff. So
yeah, the transactional fees.
What you see is not what they get ever, literally.
Right. That's a really important point. But we're running a little low on time, and I want to give Newton and Dorfis a chance to just weigh in on that real quick before we have to sign off.
Yes, I'm going to be very quick with it. Sebastian had told me about BackerKit, and he did tell me to actually research about it. And I actually started the application, but I wanted to actually build my fan base because, he has a huge fan base, but I've actually read and actually researched. It's a very good platform. It's a very good platform, especially when it comes to, because I have a few people that Kickstarter, and Roy actually use it. They will email you, even if you drop pledge, they will actually email you to see if you're still interested investing into that product. So I did look into it. So I'm just hoping, like, when I do build my fan base and get to where I want it, I will utilize that platform. As for Pitfall, my pitfall, and I'm always honest with anybody that's going to start a Kickstarter. I always tell them my fail was my Kickstarter, my very first Kickstarter, and it was just for $600. And the only reason why I failed was because I was not marketing. I just put it there and I thought, okay, it's just going to get funded. And then I had to actually learn about the culture, the Kickstarter culture, after it failed. And then I was actually mentored, especially by different variety of creators, letting me know about their experience. So always utilize the marketing scheme. Try to find something that suits you. But everything what everybody's saying is, is very helpful.
Yeah, I'm going to keep mine real short. I know we're running out of time. So, yeah, I only use Kickstarter as a crowdfunding platform. I'm not familiar with anything else, but I highly recommend that you also set up an online store. Once you actually have your comic books printed, even if it's just one issue, that's very helpful. And then the pitfall is, I'm going to loop back to shipping. So shipping is not only a beast in terms of like you having to be able to calculate your shipping, because I highly recommend that you calculate the cost of your shipping before your Kickstarter. Like you package whatever you're gonna do, weigh it, and then like if you live in California, do the calculations. How long, how much it's gonna cost to send to the East Coast, or reverse that. That way, you know the most expensive cost for a particular product. And then the other thing about shipping I have to add is that you have to kind of take into consideration the way Kickstarter does the calculation is that they your goals include your shipping. I don't think it should, but Kickstarter actually includes shipping at the what you charge as shipping as part of your reaching your goal. So like if you have your calculations and you calculate like, okay, it's going to cost me like 5,000 to print and supplies and stuff. You also have to and say, okay, I'm going to make my goal 5,000. You're still going to come up short because if you don't include shipping in that, you actually, and let's say you make your goal at 5,000. If you don't include shipping, you're actually going to, in reality, miss your goal for practical purposes. So you gotta kind of like bump that up and include, okay. And it's hard too, because especially if you encounter international shipping, because it varies and it's a lot more expensive. You don't even know how many people are gonna be international backers. So that's kind of like, oh, I have to figure that out. But so anyway, long story short, just make sure you calculate shipping correctly.
Awesome. Well, this has been an incredible panel. Really, really great information about how to run a crowdfunding campaign. I'm inspired to try it myself. And I think that, I mean, to sum it up in 2 sentences, it's market, 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 and always include the shipping. Great. Well, I want to thank all of our incredible panelists, Dorothy, Spike, Newton, and Greg, for joining us here at the Boston Comics and Color Festival. This was really great. And definitely stay tuned for our next panel. We have the Cartoonarium coming up at 3. And thanks a lot, guys. Have a great afternoon.